The neuroscience of Christ consciousness. What does it mean? How do we embody it? Welcome back to the channel. This is Professor Matt. Love you guys. Hope you're doing well. Today we are going to be talking a lot about neuroscience, Jesus Christ, the Logos, and a lot of what has to do with quantum physics. This is going to be a pretty intense, high level video. I think that everybody's going to be able to learn something from this, and I think it's going to be really, really interesting and cool. So if you're new to the channel, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here. I do want to go over a couple things real quick before we get started. First and foremost, I do have a AI tool called Astraya.ai. It tracks your alchemy, it tracks your astrology, and it gives you daily insights for everything that you've got going on. You can talk to it, you can have conversations with it. And a lot of people are really enjoying it. I now have over 50 users on this app, so I really appreciate all you guys. And if you are not looking for AI and you want more of a community, I do have the Psycosmos Online University, where we have classrooms, we have tons of information. I do weekly astrology insights for people. You can ask me questions personally. It's a great deal. Lots of people are really enjoying and loving that too. And also, I'm sorry that I have to plug this every time, guys. You know, this is how I make ends meet. I'm still just trying to pay all my bills. I know times are tough, and I know that people don't have a lot of money. That's why I have been really working hard to make sure that everything is affordable. My AI tool starts at 15 bucks a month. It can go up to 33 if you want the higher package, and my online university is like 30 bucks a month. So I tried to make sure that these were very, very affordable. I know that there's a lot of information out there. You could watch my videos for free, but if you want the higher quality, that's basically what I would recommend. Now, getting back to the video, if you want to understand the neuroscience, the quantum physics of Christ consciousness, then we have to understand toroidal energy. In fact, we're going to have to understand a couple of different key concepts here. But let's talk a little bit about Jesus. The Logos is how a lot of the esoteric space defines Jesus. Now, this is going to get really tricky, so I really want you to keep an open mind and wrap your head around this. The Logos in and of itself, oftentimes being called the Word or being called discourse or reason, is essentially the initial vibrational frequency that was established when God began creating the universe. Now, when God began creating the universe, it was really more of a split. So there was a spark, all right? Let there be light. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So just like, again, how we begin, our mother and our father combined their essences, their sexual essences, and there's a massive spark of light, and then there's division, okay? That is essentially the very beginning stages of creation. That spark, which rippled throughout all of creation and non-creation, is the frequency, the essence of Christ. Okay, so Christ is essentially like a frequency. Your soul is on a frequency, and depending on how you can steer your soul's frequency, and if you can stay on the middle path, which is the embodiment of Christ consciousness, that is how you unlock and awaken into this. And a lot of people go through this in different ways. Sometimes people have to really go through dark, horrible things in order for them to, quote unquote, see the light, So the Logos, when it says in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God, imagine that this is just a very simplistic way, okay? Imagine that there is a ball of light, and the light is both light and darkness. It's got everything embodied and imbued into it. And there is a flash, I guess you could say, of an even higher propensity of light. It's like light and darkness are intermingling and intermixing like water and oil together in this ball, I guess you could say. And then there's this flash, okay? And then the light and the darkness separate. The waters above, waters below, etc. They separate, and then the light begins to fill within that darkness, because the flash of light went throughout the entirety of all of, again, creation and non-creation. It's a really, really tough idea to wrap your head around. But basically, this oneness, this source, God, sent out a divine signal, and that was the initial emanation. And that emanation was the first thing that echoed throughout all of existence. And it continues to perpetuate because God is the source of the emanation. So, in essence, there is a world of creation, which is like our universe, a lower frequency plane of existence. There's a higher plane of existence. And then there is the connection between those two. Christ embodies the connection between those two essences. So that's just a very simplistic way of explaining it. But that's why, we have these passages, because essentially the frequency, the initial frequency that started the creation of the universe is the same frequency of the soul of the man that walked the earth 2,000 years ago. So really tough to wrap your head around, but it's going back to our source. So let's understand quantum mechanics. Let's understand toroidal fields and things like that. You have, and we're going to talk a lot of science in this video, and it's going to be really interesting. I'm going to try to break this down as simply as I can. Energy essentially works where you have electricity and magnetism. Electrical currents, these are called the Maxwell equations. Electrical currents generate a magnetic field, and a magnetic current generates an electrical field. So when you have them together, then they create this perpetual motion that sustains until it's impeded or it stops, right? You think of Newton, who I know a lot of people don't like, and it's fine. I'm not like the biggest super fan of him either, but just because of the implications, like he did do a lot of work, but everybody is always assuming that everything that he did is concrete, just like Einstein, where it's like they're all theories. Everything that I come up with is theories. No, all science is basically theories. But anyway, so magnetism and electricity combined, and they create an inertia plane. All right. And that inertia plane is really also moving at a separate field. So the electricity is creating the magnetism. So this is like God separating himself in the beginning and creating his wife, which is the original canon. And the wife is the magnetism, right? You've got El and Ma. So you've got Elohim, or El like electricity, the father, and you have Ma like mama, the mother. Okay, so you have the father and the mother, and they combined their electromagnetic proportion, and they feed into each other. Okay, it's just like sex. All right, this is why there's all these sexual innuendos, I guess you could say, in a lot of biblical canon, especially in Old Testament stuff or other mythologies, because the sexual aspect of it is important. I mean, even this looks like sex, right? You've got a circle and you've got lines going into the circle, right? And it's in a cyclical motion. So it's a current. And again, electricity creates the magnetism, and then the magnetism creates the electricity. Just like the father creates the mother and the mother creates the son, and they feed into each other. Well, that central initial inertia plane here, this is again the logos. Okay, this is a very similar to the ideal concept of the logos, because it's what's called, well, here's another figure. Okay, and the energy warps into what's called a Mobius strip. So we're going to look at a little bit of that too. But it's like this donut-shaped energy field, which everything that houses DNA or life has. We have the Earth, we have human beings, trees, the Milky Way galaxy, cells, DNA, fruit, vegetables. Pretty much anything with DNA has this exact same geometric shape in its energy aura or its field. And that is because that is how energy manifests. You have two forces that are cohesive and also opposing each other at the same time. And that central plane is what kind of is the glue that keeps them together. So, in other words, basically at the start of all creation, God creates his wife and their love creates a son. And that is like the beauty of the creationary story. This toroidal field also is the same shape as our minds, as our brains. It's also the same general shape as our bodies as well. And this is exactly what we see when you study a lot of esoterics. You'll see the symbolisms with the caduceus or the Kabbalah or chakras or DNA, the serpent on the tree. All of these are symbolical analogies for the way that nature propagates itself. And then we get into atoms, for example, which a lot of people think, when I was a kid, we had this show called Jimmy Neutron. It was a really silly show. It was on Nickelodeon. It was a kid's cartoon. And, they were really big on promoting the scientific standard of things. So, they would have transitions between scenes in the show. And I just remember like the atoms, and it would just be all those atoms. Like it's very similar to the Big Bang Theory, had the exact same thing where the transitions between scenes would have these atoms where it's like, the balls and then like the spinning orbs. That's not exactly what atoms look like. Atoms don't look like that. They actually look more like toroidal fields or eyeballs, right? And this is, I really don't know the validity of this. I actually doubt this incredibly. This is the highest resolution image ever taken of atoms, but it actually is essentially what it would look like. It's a bunch of interconnected pieces. And this is where we get into the biblical literacy, the living waters, right? If you've studied water, you understand that water holds a shape, it holds a form, it holds information. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a second when we bring up neutrinos. But basically, it's a bunch of zeros and ones. Do you see how all of the atoms or all of the neurons, because we're going to also talk about neurology in a second, it's all basically a bunch of shapes of zeros and ones holding all of creation together. The zeros would be the circular magnetic form. The ones would be the linear electric masculine forms. So again, this is father and mother coming together, interweaving and interlocking between all these like little ones and zeros. And this is how things are formed in our reality. When atoms, have covalent bonds or whatever the hell the chemistry, quantum mechanic phrases are. I'm not like, that kind of a quantum physicist doctor, but I have a basic understanding of this stuff. It's actually really easy to wrap your mind around. But they have these bonds that they perform. It's very similar to how we have hydrogen bonds within our DNA. They bond together, at least the bonding aspect of it is. They bond together, and the more that things are bond together, the lower entropy it has. Entropy is the measure of the disorder of a system, like this says. So basically, when you have a gas, there's more chaos, okay, because all the particles can bounce around. They're not stabilized. This is how the universe was created, right? There's all this information. So don't think of it as particles like, carbon and nitrogen and oxygen and all this stuff. That's actually more on a higher level of like, that's actually more denser than we're even wrapping our heads around. Everything started as energy. It started as light. It started as, again, neutrinos or like quarks or Planck scale. And all of these very, very, very microscopic aspects of creation, they all either began to communicate with each other and combine and come together, or it was all formed apart. Now, imagine each one of these. This is like a very simple analogy, okay? Imagine these green dots are people. When people group together in civilizations and societies and we connect through love and empathy, then we have lower states of disorder, right? But then as you get higher and people are more spread out and people are more in their band camp and they can do whatever they want, and everybody's got their own opinions and everybody's segregated, that's where chaos has a higher level to come out. It's very simple, and this is the same mechanics that are all throughout creation. However, there's also negatives to this. What happens if a group stays too hard together? Well, it becomes cancerous, just like cancer cells. They overcreate things, they overindulge, they smother other ones, right? Like if you're this one little middle green dot, maybe this one green dot has an idea where he wants to take advantage of the rest of the green dots, because he lacks empathy, right? And he lacks care and understanding. And so then he starts to take over, and then it becomes a smothering aspect because there's no equality or equity in the situation. So there are concepts to this, right? Like just because something becomes less entropic doesn't mean that there's not aspects to that as well. And this is kind of how energy mechanics works. We also have to understand Lorentz force, which is essentially a force on the z-axis. So if we've got an electric current, let's say that's our y-axis, we've got a magnetic field, let's say that's our x-axis, we have to have a z-axis. And this is called Lorentz force. This is, remember we were looking at this picture, the magnetic field, okay, would be moving along one spectrum, the electric field would be moving around another, and this middle section here, this would more than likely be the Lorentz force. This is kind of not the best side-by-side comparison, but this is essentially what the Lorentz force is. It creates an outer force from the two other forces. Okay, so in other words, if you and your friend get together and start a business, you know, one of you might be the CEO, the salesman, the face. That's like the I guess you could say the electric current. And you know, I'm just using this in the analogy. Then the other one's the operations of the business. That's like the magnetic force, keeping it all together. And then there's the Lorentz force, okay, which would be basically the outer expression of those two things put together, which is, you know, the brand itself. The Lorentz force is the brand. So you make, you know, or it's like one person combined with the aspects of what it means to be successful creates a brand, or business or whatever. That is essentially what we're talking about when it comes to creation. You cannot create something out of nothing. That's the only thing that can do that is essentially God. But even God wasn't doing that. God created all of existence through his own force, through his own energy, his own will. So there is really honestly no such thing. God before creation was just one unified whole of energy. There was no Lorentz force. It was just one stream. And until God separated himself and created a stream, it was like once, and it's actually in numerology too. You have zero, and zero is just zero. But as soon as zero has a consciousness, as soon as zero realizes that zero technically is one, because you can't have a state of nothing ever. You know, that the opposite of God would be nothing. It's not the devil, it's not Satan. The opposite of God would be nothing, which doesn't exist, because God is all of existence. So true nothingness doesn't exist. And that's kind of the whole really strange way you got to wrap it around. Like zero technically doesn't even exist, because zero would be a state, which means that it is one. And then if there is a one, now you have 0 and 1, which means that there is a 2. And if you have a 2, it means that there is a 0, a 1, and a 2, which now means there's a 3, and so on and so forth. And that is how evolutionarily everything evolved, right? But that's the exact same process that your body does. Oh, we are now one unified whole. Now we're going to split the two cells. Then those two cells are going to split into 4. Then 4 is going to become 8. And it just spirals into infinity. And it is because of this ideal concept of the Lorentz force. It's constantly feeding back into each other. So Maxwell was the guy who, you know, I guess created the equations. I don't know what the hell any of this stuff means. I'm just going to be completely honest with you. I don't know how to read these equations, but he was the one that discovered electric currents feed into magnetic charges or magnetic fields, and magnetic currents feed into electric fields. And so they create each other, right? And again, the initial catalyst is often an electric field, and that is the more, I guess, masculine of the two, you could say. But they're both necessary, they're both important. And magnetism creates electricity, and electricity creates more magnetism. And so this is the way that the universe operates. And again, it has to do with entropy, because entropy is where everything is less chaotic. Right, like or rather, I should say, it's the study of the spectrum of chaos, I guess, in an environment of energy. The electromagnetic toroidal field has very low entropy, okay, because there's not much that can change that unless there is a massive external force that is introduced. It's just going to perpetuate. Now, for us as human beings, this makes perfect sense. Think about your body, right? Your body, you feed in water and food, and then you excrement, right? Water and solids. Okay, so water and solids go in, water and solids come out. And everybody has to do this. There is no such thing as not eating food or not drinking water. It's just not possible. You will die. So it's the same with air. It's a current, right? You breathe in, you breathe out. You breathe in, you breathe out. You're creating a current. So all of it is the same, essentially. And 0 point energy is, again, that logos. So they're always talking about, well, you know, let's get to 0 point energy. What does that mean? From my understanding, and I'm not perfect with this, 0 point energy, the 0 point is that red circle. So that's the point, right? Like in the middle. And basically what it is, it's about maximizing the electric and magnetic fields so that they basically never die. This is actually what CERN is doing, the CERN Hadron Collider. And this is why people are so freaked out about it. And it's also the same exact shape of what the Hadron Collider actually is. It's a circle, just like this. It's a giant circle. And they make the energy go around and around and around super fast because they're manipulating this, which could potentially manipulate all of reality. So the 0 point is understanding that logos part, the Christ part, because when you have the two forces, which could be the divine masculine, the divine feminine, the two halves of your brain, the two halves of your entire body. You have your face and your body are completely split in half, two arms, two legs, right? Two testicles, two ovaries, etc. When you can maximize those two opposites, that is where the middle logos, right, the Christ consciousness maximizes from the inside, from your soul, right? So again, this is like 0 point energy and all that. But now we're going to get into more of the physical stuff. We have plasma all within the body, and plasma is very important because it holds information. The other thing that holds information is central strands, the hydrogen bonds in DNA. This is piezoelectric, which means that it holds electromagnetic currents, okay? And it uses that information to send signals all throughout the body. We also have to look at neurology. Within neurology, within neurons, okay, you have within the axon, all the neurons, by the way, look like a human. Because again, it's all the same shape, right? At the end of the day, you have a head, right, with the nucleus, the brain. Then you have a body, and then you have the dendrites, just like we have dendrites towards the bottom parts of our body. And this is all interconnected, but they're not even fully, like, physically connected. This is what it looks like. You have these synapses, and the synapses don't really physically touch the other synapse. It's like they connect, but when they connect and you zoom in all the way, there's actually like a magnetism that keeps each one of them locked in because it's energy, and then they're communicating through neutrinos, through biophotons. Mirror neurons are also part of this too, because they are how we actually understand empathy. So your brain within your axon here is full of what's called microtubules, where I should have that somewhere here. It's full of what's called microtubules. And those microtubules are basically giant abacuses that are yes/no flips and switches. And then there's like billions of those in each one of your neurons, and all of your neurons are communicating. So it's basically like you have trillions upon quadrillions of these little yes/no flips and switches within your mind. And it's all about everything. I mean, it really is. It's so complex. Obviously, our brain is like ridiculous, but basically you have these multiple bodies, I guess you could say, multiple minds, multiple voices in the brain, right? Because each neuron is like billions of these things, but billions of this intercommunication just within the neuron in and of itself. And then you have all these neurons, and when your neurons come together and they spread out, you become higher consciousness, more intelligent, right? When they shrink, when they die, when you're not feeding your temple, so to speak, then a lot of this stuff just stops to function as well. And this is really, really important because this is all about the spectrum. And this is about how if we do all the things and we gain tons and tons and tons of experience and wisdom, then we'll be able to change our cognition and our consciousness by getting all of those neurons more towards the center of the spectrum, the yes/no spectrum. We'll actually understand more things. And that leads to higher empathy. That's what mirror neurons are all about. It's about watching and observing and attaining understanding social behaviors and higher levels of empathy. So if you have lower levels of empathy, you don't have as much neuron activation. That doesn't mean just let random people into your house, but this also comes into neuroplasticity, right? It's all about a balance, right? You can't just like let people walk all over you either. That's not what empathy is. It's not just being weak and meek and mild. So neuroplasticity is how our brains change and how we evolve. Basically, this is how we get things to stick within our minds. And there's a lot that obviously goes into it, but it's the ability of the brain to physically change the brain structure due to learning and more experiences. More neurons and synaptic connections are formed with learning, memory, and experience. This creates physical changes in brain tissue. Physical changes. So we see this physically. So the remodeling following brain dysfunction or injury. So it's all interconnected, and then a lot of them are cut off, and then the ones that are cut off begin to die, right? And this is also part of healing. Like, let's say you have, it's not all a bad thing. Let's say you have neurons that are just triggering bad habits or triggering resurfacing negative emotions, right? Like then you kind of either want to change them or kill those off to some degree. Probably not kill them off, obviously, if you can just change them, but that's again part of learning and attaining higher wisdom. So another thing that we need to understand is what's called polyvagal theory, and this is how the autonomic nervous system, particularly the vagus nerve, influences our emotional regulation, social connection, and response to stress. And the polyvagal system, it's very simple. You're either in the fight or flight, or you're in the higher levels of consciousness. When your entire neurological being, from brain down into body, the vagus nerve is really just the extension of the brain into the body, right? And all the subsequent nervous systems that run alongside of it. But it's still important to understand because that is playing a huge role. Remember, like, think of this brain and the nervous system as one giant neuron. That's what it is. Look at this. Again, I mean, it's like, look at this one in the bottom right corner. Here's your brain. Here's your body. It's very, very simple. It's the exact same thing because it's all the same system. The other thing that we have to understand is called fascia. Fascia is microcrystalline structure within the middle parts of our muscle tissue. So just like hydrogen bonds have that middle part, just like the spinal column is the middle way, right? Everything is within the middle path, and that is exactly where it focalizes, just like in the torus field itself. But everything has energy, so every part of you is important to understand this divine mechanism. This is also part of the inner alchemy cycle and why all of that stuff is made in the mid center of the body, right? The solar plexus, the Bethlehem, the house of bread. But the fascia is within the muscle tissue. This helps us with quantum communication as well throughout our entire body in the bodily sense, physically. So all of this is interconnected deep into our muscle, deep into our bodies, really. Now we have to get into neutrinos and biophotons because, well, biophotons are basically just neutrinos anyway, but they're biological. And so what are these, right? A neutrino is it says it's a subatomic particle, and it's a fundamental particle. So they are electrically neutral. They're nearly massless. They're not massless. A lot of people think they are. They're not. Their mass comes from housing information. So really, like, take that into consideration. You have this thing that is light. It can pass through things. Your brain, it can pass through your skull. Okay, it can be like your pineal gland and all that stuff. It can exceed through the physical body. There's like a bajillion of them all throughout the universe, and they're everywhere, and they're passing through everything at all periods in time. They move at the speed of light. They react to gravity and the weak nuclear force. They mostly pass through matter, oscillates between electron and all the other ones, has antimatter equivalents. So antimatter also does come into this too. But basically, this is like little orbs of light of information. And when you understand this, this is how our body communicates through cells, through DNA, through the neurology, right? The fascia, all of the physical stuff is there to prove that our body has a electromagnetic current system. And it is the living waters, okay? Not just like the physical water. It's like this is like living water, okay? Because it's like it ripples, it spins, it moves, it flows through things, around things. This is the logos. This is the way that we tap into our inner light and activate our Christ consciousness. So biophotons exist in all throughout reality, and they are basically how we perceive reality as well. It all has information within it. And so it gets really complicated. But basically, well, these are the microtubules, by the way, that I was talking about before. And you'll see, up here, right? Like this is our end goal. Our end goal is to spread out. And the way I like to think of it is, like I mentioned, each neuron is like a person. So how we attain Christ consciousness, how we get more intelligent, well, just like this, just like how atoms stick together and form into creation, how we become more intelligent and we evolve as a species is through um, basically friendship. As like corny and as cliche as that sounds, when the neurons hold hands with each other and all stand together, that is the expansion of your mind and the expansion of your consciousness. When you have those huge moments of thought and you have those like big aha breakthrough moments, that's because your neurons are coming together, and they're it's not because they're battling or dying or shutting down. It's when they come together, right? And it's a beautiful thing to when you really think about it. So there's a lot more that go into it. Like, here's the neurotransmitters. Everything that we think is through wireless communication. So now think about how this has impacted so many people. Autism is on a rise, et cetera, et cetera. And we have Wi-Fi and cell phone radiation everywhere. This is causing people to undergo psychosis and a lot of other problems too. And then lastly, this is what's known as the hypothesis of the homunculus, as far as it maps to our brains. And what it really is it's like a Mobius strip. As you can see, there's all these parts of our brain that are all encoded on mainly that external part, the cerebral cortex, the cerebrum. And you can see all these parts, but it looks so odd. Like this is the way that our body thinks of itself, I guess, in a way. And really, again, it is just a Mobius strip. It's a toroidal field. If you were, I wish we had a better visual for this because this just looks awkward. But it is essentially warping and wrapping itself around, and your brain is responsible for taking care of the entirety of your body. So going all the way back to the beginning, the logos is really about understanding the concept of the interconnectivity of all things. It is the waters of life. It is light. It is word. It is vibration. It is discourse and reason. Right? It is the reason why things even operate or things were created to begin with. What is the real big secret? It's about evolution. All of these spiral mechanics, the Mobius strips, the toroidal fields, it's about evolution. It's about learning. Here's the reality. God created the universe so that he could understand whether or not he was perfect. That is one of the greater philosophical takes. All right. God, if you were perfect, how would you know you're perfect? Why would you create all of existence and include evil in that? It's because God was testing himself. It's an evolutionary thing. We are all living through God's sandbox, so to speak, of his creation so that we can understand and download, convert darkness into light, gain all of the wisdom and information. And then what happens? You die and you go to heaven. You're going back to source. You're bringing your experience and information with you back to source. And the reason why is because God is the mind, conscious and unconscious, operator of all of existence. So God is learning through our souls. He's learning through our experiences, both mother and father. And we are the children, right? So this is a very deep concept, and I hope that you guys really enjoyed this video. Once again, if you'd like to support me, please come and check out my online university and my AI tool. Again, I'm really sorry that I have to keep plugging in and asking for people to come join, but everything really does help. We are in some very crappy times right now, so again, I get it. But if you can afford to partake in checking out my AI app or my online university or my books or my courses on Udemy or anything else, I have retreats that I do as well. If you're interested, come inquire with me. If you want one-on-one coaching, come inquire with me. I would be more than happy to set something up. I've got a lot of projects that I'm working on now, but I just really appreciate all the support. I love you guys, and I am looking forward to seeing you in tomorrow's video. Stay tuned and stay healthy and golden out there. Love you guys.